You twins?
Nah, we cousins.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and we need to talk about Sinners, Ryan Coogler's latest film starring Michael B. Jordan and Michael B. Jordan, alongside a stacked and just stellar cast of top-tier talent in their night-long fight against vampires. So this movie has a lot of twists and turns and some ambiguous reveals that we need to discuss, plus we need to explain the ending and the post-credit scene that I hope none of you missed, because in my theater, people started getting up and leaving as the credits were rolling, and I was like, what are you doing? So guys, I kid you not, this might be the best vampire movie that I have seen since Lost Boys, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I had no idea going into this movie that it was even about vampires. But I have to say, it makes perfect sense once you see the movie as to why vampires were the most obvious choice to be the lurking evil in this movie. Because they perfectly represent the key theme of the movie, which is that of culture and the changes in culture over the centuries and how culture connects to the concept of immortality and what it means to be human. You can love and respect and embrace your culture, but you can also transcend it and lay your own roots that inspire and grow throughout the years and that draw inspiration from previous iterations of said culture. Or you can take the path of the vampire and stay exactly the same for an eternity, never growing, never moving on, and never having a hand at the wheel of your own life. And this symbolizes the bad parts of culture and how a refusal to grow beyond your culture and adapt with the times can lead to some pretty dark places, but we have to keep in mind, and another key theme of this movie is how the abandonment or disrespect of one's cultural roots and traditions can also lead us down a very dark path. So what I really enjoyed overall about this movie was how the first half is basically an entire separate genre from the second half, but the two halves of the film work together so well and demonstrate just perfectly the film's message of how things change over time and how we must be open to transitioning into the new while still remembering and learning from the past, both the good and the bad. And seriously, it is insane how before switching over into the horror genre vampire movie in the second half, we spend the first half of the film watching what feels like a period piece movie about two young entrepreneurial black men in the deep south sticking it to the man at a time and place where that just wasn't done. Again, playing into the theme of transcending time and culture throughout the centuries, growing beyond the things that have kept you chained. For African Americans, they were literally placed in chains during a very dark time in history, slavery being a sinful stain of our history that shouldn't be forgotten, but remembered and learned from. And this ties into the fact of how even after being freed, black men like Smoke and Stack were still chained by systemic racism. So on one hand, we have that great, deep, important story unfolding before us, and then we take this sharp turn into this terrifying, eerie, bloody, gory horror movie that has you on the edge of your seat. And I am honestly just blown away by how Ryan Coogler managed to give us a vampire movie that takes place in the deep south of all places, while simultaneously telling such an important story about not only black culture, but just culture in general and the transcendence of time that humanity can embrace through our various cultures. Sure, becoming a vampire allows you to become immortal and live an eternal life on Earth in your flesh body, but what does it cost? Well, as Annie explains, it costs you your free will. Your soul becomes trapped in this cursed and lifeless vessel of sin, and you're basically just along for the ride. Again, playing into the film's theme of taking the determined easy path or breaking free and creating your own path. It may be easier to just let the vampire take your life, become a vampire yourself, and let the evil and hate of your worldly sin consume you and lead you down a path not of your own choosing. But what takes bravery is breaking from that easier path, embracing the inevitability of death for your worldly body, and allowing yourself to transcend beyond that of the physical world. Now, when I say that, you can take it to mean literally having your soul transcend into an afterlife, as we saw with Annie and her baby. But really, I think this is meant to represent the transcendence of people through their culture, which is passed down through the generations. So even in death, in a way, they are still there. And a huge piece of all culture is, of course, music and dancing. That's right, this movie wasn't just a Deep South meets Chicago gangsters meets vampire movie, it was also a musical. And I love the scene in The Juke when Sammy is playing that demonstrates the ability of music to connect you not only to the past, but to the future, driving home that theme theme of immortality without succumbing to hate or evil. And later in the film, in the post-credit scene, we see the vampires of Stack and Mary, who are still their young, vibrant selves as compared to a now old and near-death Sammy. Mary and Stack long for and miss the music of old, the time in which they came from, but it is Sammy who has paved his own path in life and who is happy and content with the choices that he has made, and he doesn't fear the end of his life. He welcomes it because he knows that his impact on the world through his music and his contributions to his culture will live on for generations, and he's able to do that without having to have become a vampire. And this all ties back to Smoke and Stack's father being a hateful man. His abuse led these two brothers to thinking that they too were destined by Lineage to be hateful men, pushing them into a life of crime in order for them to break free of the societal chains that kept black men from climbing the socioeconomic ladder. These two brothers may not have known it, but they were good men. They served their country in a war when that very country still refused to give them the rights they deserved. Now, like I said, their father was a bad man, a hateful man, and the two brothers, Smoke especially, thought that he had no choice but to be a bad man too in order to thrive. Smoke was of the belief that where you come from determines where you are headed, and to an extent, he was right. Your past, even the past from before you were born, can greatly impact your future and who you become and the path you will ultimately take in life. Essentially, he is of the belief that there is no free will. But what this movie is about is the very concept of free will and the embrace of free will, the embrace of breaking from a predetermined path and instead laying your own. So when Smoke told Sammy that with him being the son of a preacher, that was the life he should return to, and keep in mind he told Sammy this to protect him. Smoke felt that he had had no choice but to be in this life, but he wanted better for Sammy, and I think to a certain degree he had a jealousy of Sammy, being that he had a good man as a father who laid a righteous path for Sammy to walk. But Sammy didn't want to walk that path. He wanted to make his own path. And the reason that bothered Smoke so much was because if Sammy broke from his path to be the man he wanted to be, then that would mean that Smoke could have done the same and could no longer blame his father for the bad things that he has done. Now, this movie is called Sinners, and it does a great job at giving us glimpses of what some may consider traditional views of sin. There's a lot of sexual content that some would consider perverse. There's the fact that we see a married woman cheating on her husband, and there's the countless sins committed by Smoke and Stack as a lineage of sin passed down by their father, who no doubt also had a grueling life as a black man in 19th century America.
My daddy was an evil man. And he passed that evil down to us.
But another crucial piece to Smoke's broken heart that pushed him further and further from grace was the loss of his infant child, who we get to see him reconnect with after he is cleansed of his sins via a metaphorical baptism in this body of water. We see the lead vampire repeatedly dunking Sammy in the water, reminiscent of creek baptisms, which are very common in the South. This visual imagery of the vampire repeatedly dunking Sammy into the water symbolized Sammy's sin being washed away, and the same is true for when Smoke steps into the water to save his cousin and kill the vampire. And his killing of the vampire and the baptism by fire that the vampire receives when the sun rises symbolizes Smoke severing from the weight of his father's hate and becoming his own man. And guys, if it isn't obvious, I loved this movie, and I think movies like this could save the film industry. It's no secret that the film industry, specifically the theater industry, has been fighting for its life since the pandemic. We actually have a great video up on the channel right now detailing how horror movies were saved by the pandemic. But in the same vein, I've been of the opinion that it was horror movies that actually saved the theater industry following the pandemic kicking theaters while they were down. There's just something that has become repetitive and stale that has plagued the film industry for a really long time now, affecting both movie theaters and streaming services as well. There is so much stuff and a lot of it just isn't good, but when movies like this that are clearly crafted by filmmakers, not executives in their suits and the top of tall buildings, these are the types of films that stick with you, the type of films that spark long-lasting conversations and that you're still thinking about a week or two later and that people want to see together in a theater. And this movie, not just as a horror movie, but as a film carefully crafted by an artist, it's something that not only looks stunning, but the story and the performances, they engulf you and they transcend you, and it just transports you into the film itself. And it's these types of movies that I think can save film and compete with I don't know, TikTok. But with filmmakers like Ryan Coogler, Crowley Farja, Jordan Peele, Bong Joon-ho, Christopher Nolan, Greta Gerwig, Robert Eggers, Nia DaCosta, Oz Perkins, and oh so many more. With them making movies that go beyond that of the standardized slop that has become so stale, it gets me excited for the future of this industry and us as human beings being able to continue telling stories about our cultures in the movie format. And don't get me wrong, I love me a blockbuster. I'm excited as hell for Avengers Doomsday. I think what Tom Cruise is doing with Top Gun and Mission Impossible is just brilliant and also saved the movie theaters coming out of COVID. But a crucial piece to this puzzle is movies like Sinners, and I am so glad that these types of movies are being made again. It's been way too long. And what I mean when I say these types of movies, I don't just mean horror movies, I mean something original. But hey, those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts on the movie down in the comments below. And if you're new here, please do feel free to subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Colton Ogburn.